Do you know the fable of the scorpion and the frog? A scorpion wants to cross a river but cannot swim, so it asks a frog to carry it across. The frog hesitates, afraid that the scorpion might sting it, but the scorpion promises not to, pointing out that it would drown if it killed the frog in the middle of the river. The frog considers this argument sensible and agrees to transport the scorpion. Midway across the river, the scorpion stings the frog anyway, dooming them both. The dying frog asks the scorpion why it stung despite knowing the consequence, to which the scorpion replies, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't resist. It is my character." We are talking about episode 3 today, and as usual, please don't spoil anything in the comments from beyond episode 3. We open episode 3 with a flashback to the ghoul pre-war, who I'm going to call Coop in his pre-war scenes because that's what people are calling him. And immediately we're set up with this contrast from what we've seen in him in the Wasteland. He is playing a hero. He is playing a good guy. He is refusing to shoot. And honestly, it's a little too on the nose for me when the director is, encouraging him to use violence, and he says the audience wants to see that a good man can be driven too far, because we already know that's what happens to him, and I'm anticipating that's what we're seeing happen to Lucy. Like, it's right on the nose here. They say it's you, your gun, and your personal code bringing order to the Wild West. That is exactly what all of the Fallout games are about. It is you, your gun, and your personal code bringing order to the wasteland. We see him flirt a little bit with his wife, and it's very cute, and it's clear that the show is trying to raise the stakes for us, because we already know that he lost his daughter. We saw that set up in episode 1, and we know that he's a pretty horrible guy now, and now we also know that he lost a wife on top of everything else. His cowboy costume has a lot of scorpions on it, and honestly, as soon as I saw that, the frog and scorpion fable was the very first thing that came to mind to me. It's this interesting question of, if something is by nature bad, will it always be bad? Can it resist hurting things when it is in its nature to be bad? And on the other hand, when something is good, is that just permanently its nature to be a good thing, or can that good be corrupted? In the show so far, I have been questioning, is the ghoul bad? Is he just like a bad guy? Is it even possible to be a bad guy? And on the other hand, is Lucy a good character? Does she have good in her? And is that good corruptible? And I think we're going to continue to explore that through the rest of this episode and the rest of the show. Back in the present, the ghoul finds the doctor's decapitated body, and we know that Lucy has gone through with it. This horrible thing that she didn't think she'd be able to do. She has decapitated the body, which is horrifying. And we find Lucy carting the head around and also eating yum yum deviled eggs, which I hated. I don't know why. I always pictured them differently. Like, the way that they looked in the show was just like a regular deviled egg, but like in a box. And I'm realizing I don't know what I pictured, because I've seen the box of yum yum deviled eggs before. I guess I thought they were like dehydrated, or like you had to open them. Like, it just doesn't seem like they'd travel well. So I don't know. She puts a tracker in the head, which immediately I'm like, yeah, she's going to lose that head. Like, this show, it does a pretty good job of setting up these like Chekhov's gun moments of something happens in the very beginning of the episode that, of course, plays a role in the very end of the episode. As soon as she put the tracker in the head, I was like, yeah, she's going to get separated from that head and need that tracker. She does make a little comment about the night she saw being really something. So I was pleased to feel validated that I did not imagine the romantic tension between her and Max, as I am apt to doing. Speaking of Max, we flash back to him right away. He's still playing around in this little marketplace, and it's kind of fun to see. He shakes some caps out of his boot, which I've always been so curious, how do these characters carry around enough caps? Like, caps are bigger than coins. And in my playthroughs, I'm carrying around thousands of them. And like, how? Some people jump him to try and steal the power armor. He fights back in a very gruesome, skull-crushing way, but he does, and he keeps the power armor. It is hilarious to me how quickly the Brotherhood is like, oh, your scribe died? I'll send you another one. They're a dime a dozen. We truly do not value them. And in a beautiful twist of fate, the new scribe he gets is his old bully, Thaddeus. Max is trying to pass himself off as Knight Titus, and it's interesting to me because he's being a jerk about it. He does the same polish my codpiece move. And I have to wonder, at what point is being a jerk just you trying to fit in? Like, at what point is it justified? And then at what point are you just being a jerk? Like, what's the limit of how cruel can you be with it still being justifiable? When does it just turn into, yeah, you're doing the exact same things? Like, if the outcome is the exact same, bullying a scribe, is he not just being as bad as Titus was? This episode does bounce around a lot more than the previous episodes did, but I am going to try and follow it chronologically, even though that means switching between characters a lot. So bear with me, because we're suddenly back to Lucy, and she's looking out on this lake, and she's kind of experiencing nature for the first time. It's kind of neat to see, and I realize that she has been in a vault her entire life. She's never looked outdoors. She's never seen really most of these animals, like a deer, never seen before. So that was kind of cool. The head gets stolen by a gulper. Called it. She was going to lose that head as soon as she put a tracker in it. But the head gets stolen by a gulper, and correct me if I'm wrong, but gulpers made their first appearance in Fallout 4, the Far Harbor DLC, which I love that DLC. It's a huge new playable space. You get incredible backstory for Nick Valentine, who I love, and you get these new creatures. The gulpers are very neat, but we're going to get our full reveal of the gulper a little bit later on. Right now, we're just kind of getting glimpses of it swimming around and lurking and stealing from her. The ghoul has found her, and again, I'm not loving the ghoul's look. Like, his eyes just look like regular human eyes. And I've seen at this point a bunch of like TikTok thirst traps. Like, people really think this ghoul is attractive. Why was I made fun of when I said I was into Hancock? Like, what's that double standard about? That's not fair, okay? I got teased for it, and now liking ghouls is cool all of a sudden. The next scene change I am thrilled for, because we are back in the vault, baby, and I love the vaults. I love vault lore. I love learning more about vault tech. I love learning more about the experiments, and we are getting some details here. And we're getting some answers to questions that I had before. When I watched the first episode, I was so curious how Lucy just got out so easily. And in this episode, Chet confirms that he was the gatekeeper. He's not anymore. He lost that position because he let Lucy out, obviously. But he was the gatekeeper, which kind of explains to me like how she got out so easily. It was because Chet was able to do this favor for her. Like, it wasn't just a flaw in vault security overall. I also want to know if any of you recognize the actor who played Norman, because I don't. But I was talking to a friend about this, and she told me she recognized him from Hannah Montana. So I need to know if that was anybody else's first thought too, because he does not look familiar to me even a little bit. But he goes into his meeting with the Vault Council, and we get some vault lore. There is a poster in the background, and of course they're going to say it in the next few seconds, but I paused and wrote it down as soon as I saw the poster. 3 vaults stronger together. And that answers my questions, because I was so confused how we had vaults that were talking to each other. And we knew it was at least 3, because her father had come from a different vault to marry her mother. And then she was in this vault marrying somebody from a 3rd vault. So we knew there were 3 touching. It's 31, 32, and 33. And they are all branded as like stronger together, the trio of vaults. So we know those 3 vaults have been in touch with each other. I think that was intentional. I don't know if there are more experiments that were done on them. I'm assuming we're going to get some more information on that later, but I think we can assume it's intentional that this trio of vaults was not necessarily like exchanging people freely from the beginning, but at least in touch. We know that they can like telegram the other overseers and stuff. They refer to themselves in the vaults as the last vestiges of civilization. And I think that's neat too, because clearly there still is a civilization happening on the surface. It's just not what they would consider a civilization. Like, there are still people up there. Like, people are still doing things on the surface and reproducing and trading and fighting. Like, there is a civilization there. They just don't see it as a civilization. They don't see it as civilized. Norm is obviously being punished for his role in Lucy getting out of the vault, and I think he's such a neat character because he points out, like, there's not much you can do to punish me. There's not a job that I haven't had in the vault, and I hate everything about this place. So what can you do? Like, you can't really be a burnout, unemployed, loser in a vault because the vaults have this perfect employment. Everybody has a little house unit. You have to be assigned one. There's not really a way to be unhoused when you're inside of a vault. There's not really a way to be unemployed because people are so valuable and there are roles to fill. And that's fascinating because you have what is meant to be this utopia when you're in a control vault, or again, I don't know what the experiment is here, but when you have like a tolerable scenario in a vault, you're pretty much in this utopia designed society. So what do you do with a character like Norm? Quick side note, I love their Vault Tech mugs. I want one. I'm sure those are available somewhere. I need to look up where I can get one because I need one of those bad boys. The raiders from episode 1 are in jail. Of course, later that's revealed to not really be a jail. It's their reading room they've repurposed, but for all intents and purposes, they are in a jail. And that kind of hurts a lot of my theories, because y'all know that my mindset with vaults and with settlements and with wastelanders is that really anybody can be rehabilitated if you meet their basic needs. If they have shelter and food and water, they're gonna want to help out. Like, the raiding will go away. And that's not true here. Like, they are getting their 3 square meals, they are safe inside the vault, and they are animals. Like, functionally, they're just hitting the walls and they're trying to get out and they're threatening and they're extremely violent people. And that hasn't calmed down at all, despite having access to food and water and not starving anymore. In Fallout 4, there was a group of Minutemen that we learn about through terminal entries that, because they weren't able to get enough work to make enough caps to afford food, that's why they turned raider. Like, they didn't want to hurt people, they were just forced into it. And that's always kind of been my theory, that you can go either way across that spectrum. If your basic needs aren't being met, you're going to turn to more violent needs to meet them. But if your basic needs are being met, then you don't need to do the raiding anymore. Like, raiders can be, normal wastelanders. And the show does not seem to agree with me. In fact, a lot of my views here are gonna get mocked, basically, when we come back to the vault in a few scenes. We're back to Maximus and Thaddeus, and Max is being a jerk. He's making Thaddeus climb this tree. I can't tell now, and I don't know if he can tell, or if any of us are supposed to be able to tell, if he is being a jerk really to try and be convincing as Knight Titus, because maybe he's notoriously been a jerk for everybody and Max is just trying to play the role, or maybe he's trying to enjoy this and get a little bit of revenge on Thaddeus, who sucked, like, who made his life really difficult. And I don't know if Max knows truly the motivations behind why he's kind of being a jerk about this. They talk a little bit about the ghoul. Thaddeus says, ghouls are scary. And that's interesting to me because in the games, feral ghouls are definitely scary, but non-feral ghouls, typically haven't been, like, horrible. Like, they just kind of seem like normal people. And I know there are people in the games who are, really biased against ghouls, but usually they're in the wrong for that. Like, Hancock getting kicked out of Diamond City by his own brother, that's kind of heartbreaking. Sorry, this video is a little bit just a love letter to Hancock. We also learn that ghouls leave a radiation trail. I really think that the ghouls in the show are just completely different than the ghouls in the games. Like, I think there's some part of ghouls in the show that are just kind of inherently more violent and, I guess, on a lot of drugs and leaking radiation all over the place. Or maybe it is just this particular ghoul that's, like, constantly on jet to survive, but I don't know, given that when he was in the grave, he was still being fed some sort of radioactive substance, I'm almost led to believe that ghouls need that to survive in this, iteration of ghouls in the show. But let me know what you think, or if you think I'm totally off the mark here, but I think that my previous ghoul logic just doesn't apply to this one. I also burst out laughing when they find the decapitated doctor's body and they're trying to figure out if it's the right guy, and they're like, well, show me the illustration, and, like, hold it up. That was really funny. That was really well done. Cut back to the ghoul and Lucy, where he is waterboarding her. He does have a pretty cool setup for it, though. I am kind of impressed that he's managed to rig this, like, dipping mechanic through pulleys. I don't know. It was cool. He talks about how torture never works, but people do it anyway, which is a long-winded way of him saying, I'm not actually torturing you. But of course, he is actually torturing her. If he was actually trying to use her as bait, he would have, I don't know, had her just keep her feet in the water or something. He is torturing her, and he admits that he's not doing it because he thinks that it's going to work. He makes a comment about how, like, well, torture didn't go away even though it doesn't work. And I think his point is that people are just bad. Like, at their core, people are sadists. And he may truly believe that. That may have come from his past trauma, which I'm sure we're going to learn more about. I think he thinks that people are inherently bad. And his comments about how people torture each other anyway, even though there's no point to it, kind of drives that home. Right after this, we get our first clear view of the gulper, and it's delightfully weird. One of my mutuals made a video about how the, like, side things on the gulper actually indicate that it's a juvenile. I don't know if that was an intentional, like, design choice by the producers of the show, but I'm choosing to take it as intentional that this particular gulper is a juvenile. juvenile because I think it makes the next scenes funnier. The finger-like things that it has in its mouth are horrific and fun. It's like this fun mutation. Like I really love world building, and seeing something like that is delightful. It's creepy, it's weird. Even its arms, when it's kind of coming out of the water, are like spookily human, and it's very fun. Lucy kind of fights it off, and then she brings up what I think is the most important bit of this episode, the golden rule. The idea that you should treat others the way you want to be treated. Because, I mean, that's what she was taught in the vault. And the ghoul can kind of laugh this off. Like, that's not how things work in the wasteland. But we're going to keep exploring this idea of being good versus being evil and how you get from one to the other. He then decides to take Lucy prisoner and puts essentially a collar around her to drag her. And I realize in that moment, I just don't like him. I think that he's a sadist, and watching a sadist be a sadist is just not interesting. And I know some people love that narrative of watching somebody who was such a good guy fall from grace. The world has clearly, given him the short end of the stick. He lost his wife, he lost his daughter. The world has been very cruel to him. I have no doubt that we're going to continue exploring the ways that the world was very cruel to him. I am not interested in simply watching hurt people hurt people. It's been done as a narrative, and that is my personal taste in storytelling. It's not to say that that storytelling is bad. It sometimes just feels like a fantasy for people who have been really hurt, and they want to see it as an excuse or revenge fantasy of the world has hurt me and now I can be awful. And I just think that's so much more cowardly. Like, as much as Lucy is the butt of his joke for genuinely thinking that the golden rule applies in the wasteland, I do think you should treat people the way you want to be treated. And having bad things happen to you isn't an excuse to do bad things to others. I also don't really believe that the whole narrative of this show can just be good people getting corrupted. Like, that would be a very boring narrative. So I think there has to be some redemption at some point, and I'm interested to see how that plays out. With that, we're back to Maximus and Thaddeus, and we're going to talk about a different form of the golden rule. Thaddeus is actually trying to be a good squire here, for the record. He's refilling the water tank for Max, and it becomes very clear again that Maximus is not, or was not, a very good scribe, because he doesn't know what any of the responsibilities actually are. But Max kind of tries to get Thaddeus to talk about Maximus and how he treated him and what he thought of him. And this is the other part of the golden rule. Thaddeus bullied Maximus because Thaddeus was bullied. He didn't treat Maximus the way he wanted to be treated. He treated him the way he was treated. And that is kind of the opposite, but also complement to the golden rule. You treat people how you were treated if you don't address it within yourself. Or as they describe it, it's kind of the way of the wasteland. It's the rule of the wasteland. You treat people how you were treated. I'm curious how that works. If you were treated really, really well for your entire life up until something bad happened to you, is that enough to flip it? Like, was Thaddeus always treated like garbage and that's why he treated Maximus like garbage? Or if you had been treated well before, what does it take to flip that switch? And if that's the way it works, can we flip it the other way? If you were treated badly and then you get treated with a lot of kindness, how much kindness does it take to flip somebody back to treating others with kindness? We explore that again further back in the vault. And I think these vault scenes, I think we're supposed to be laughing at the vault dwellers. I think it's supposed to be silly. I don't think it's silly. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that because they're clearly the butt of the joke when they say things like, we will deal with this in a manner most befitting our shared values. But to be honest, that is unironically how I would handle a situation like that. I understand that they're virtue signaling and they're not coming up with any real ideas. They're just spouting this copy-paste rhetoric without actually solving the problem that they have a bunch of violent prisoners. That is a problem that they need to deal with. But truly, what do you do in that situation? They make a pretty good point that their numbers are dwindling and they are kind of desperate for new DNA. It doesn't really make sense to kill these people, and that is out of line with their values. So what do you do? I really do think that everybody offering to help is so sweet. Like, again, I know it's the butt of the joke that one guy's like, oh, I can teach them calculus, but I love that. Because imagine, genuinely imagine that you have grown up in this very, very sheltered community, and there's been another group of people that you have been told to hate your entire life. And imagine you're very naive, you don't know much, but you do know calculus. It is your favorite thing. It brings you joy. And now imagine those people you hate more than anything have hurt you and come into your home and taken a bunch from you. And your reaction is, I still want to share with them the thing that makes me happy, the thing that I can offer. Is it naive to think that calculus can make a difference here? Yeah, of course it is. I get the joke. But it's also so sweet. And I know I'm taking this too seriously, but I don't care. But then we get a little added twist, and in classic Fallout, the water chip is broken, which means it's going to be harder to sustain their vault population on fresh water. And now we have truly a classic trolley problem. If your value is to value all life and to keep them alive for their DNA, try and reintegrate them to vault society, at what point, when it becomes a choice between current vault dwellers or everyone surviving, when do you push that trolley off the tracks? And I think that's a really interesting ethical question. Now we flip back to Maximus and Thaddeus, who are encountering the gulper. My earlier concerns that he was being kind of a jerk like Titus were immediately put to bed because he does not send Thaddeus to his death. He says, I will fight, I will stand here, you get out of here, which I really respected. I really like Max. He's trying to be the hero that he thought the Brotherhood was. And the scene that we get of Thaddeus being pulled in that thing's mouth is amazing. It's truly like the music, the finger thingies on the mutated gulper, the slow digestion, oh my God, it's so funny. It's so wonderful. I choose to believe that it's a juvenile gulper based on the side things. I'll put up a picture. And that just makes it even funnier to me. It's this really fun, silly, delightful scene. Maximus and Thaddeus get a hold of the head, and then we're back to Lucy and the ghoul. And I think we are watching Lucy discover that people can be a lot crueler than she had previously realized. Like, ever thought was possible. And that's a really hard realization to come to, and it's interesting watching her come to terms with it. I'm assuming that this isn't the worst situation she's going to be in. I'm kind of bracing myself for stuff getting a lot worse for her in the next few episodes, because right now all that's happening is he's not giving her a drink of water. I'm also worried about the level of radiation damage she's taking. She's taking a lot of rads. I guess not as many as somebody on the surface would be taking, but I would be surprised if at no point does she get any sort of radiation sickness. They're back on the Hollywood studio lot or whatever the film company is, and they see a billboard of Vault Boy. And it hits me, for her, how important that must be. Because from her point of view, Vault-Tec has saved her life. It's practically a religious experience for her. Like, this is her God. This is her home. This is her savior. This is something that has only ever been good to her. It means so much to her. It represents all the good in the world to her. And in a twist I truly never saw coming, we get a flashback that reveals that the ghoul is the original Vault Boy. I said in my episode 1 recap, I was impressed by the costume designing choices of keeping the color palette between his cowboy outfit and the Vault suits consistent, because I thought that it was just a nice marriage between pre-war and post-war scenes that made the video game colors feel immersive. But it turns out the Vault suits were actually based on his cowboy outfit because he was the spokesperson of the brand. And that was just, it really caught me unexpected. It was really cool. And I love that we get that backstory. And I love seeing that Americans pre-war really believed in Vault-Tec, even though they were, later revealed to be absolutely horrible. The vaults were never big enough to help a significant portion of Americans. They were extremely unethical. They did experiments on people without their consent. It was completely cruel. And so I love the world building of seeing pre-war Coop say, like, y'all are doing a great job. Like, this is amazing. Like, Americans love this because people really believed it. It also made me think of, like, if this was happening today, who would be the spokesperson? Like, who would be the celebrity endorsement? And suddenly I thought of Kim Kardashian and her Skims brand. Like, can you imagine? Like, Kim Kardashian endorsing something like this in all of our future outfits forever, just being based on like Skims because that's her costume. Not costume, you know what I mean. Like, and that's where we leave things with episode 3. I'm really glad that we went back to the vault in this episode. I love vault lore, and I love that we got the backstory of Vault Boy. I also liked the running theme of the golden rule, how Lucy is naive and thinking that everybody should treat everybody else like they want to be treated, and then Thaddeus immediately contrasting that with, well, people were mean to me, so I was mean to you. Like, it is human nature to hurt other people when we're hurt. That said, me personally, I'm a little bored about stories where it's just, yep, hurt people hurt people. We know that's true. So I'm hoping we get more character development from the ghoul and from Lucy in these next few episodes. If you've watched this episode, please let me know what you think. I don't have anybody to talk to about this show, so I love hearing from you guys in the comments. I'll be back next week with my thoughts on episode 4, and in the meantime, you can check out my series of Fallout settlement builds or anything else I talk about. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.